I can provide. Okay.
Okay, so I'll share mine. There we go. Okay. Uh, well, I'm Tony Batalla. I'm a board member of FRN, and I am the Chief Technology Officer for the City of San Leandro here in the city, and really happy to do this. And I will admit, I'll be the first to admit that I may not be the best champion of document management, but thankfully my wife Stacy, um, really has a good um, has a dial band, and so I consulted very closely with her on portions of this. But what I do hope to get across are some of the bigger landscape that we're all working in, and some practices to protect your information, to ensure that things are safe and secure, and we can find this information when we need it. And it's actually timely because my son, pictured here, this is Anton. Um, he is entering into kindergarten next year, so we're going through the whole enrollment process. And there's, of course, lots of documentation and finding his IEP from when he was 3 years old and transferred from regional center to the school district, and everything that I'm sure all of you have or are going to deal with. And so um, yeah, the document management is really important. And, when you need those documents, last thing you want to do is be me trying to get the enrollment done and looking for that IEP and wondering where it was from 2.5 years ago. So jumping into the agenda, we'll cover digital systems, so cloud systems, where storing things online, security, and some folder structure. This is where my wife this is all her, and scanning, and getting the documentation into your system, and then Q&A. So I hope to try to move through it. I don't want to keep you on a Friday afternoon for too long, but I'm certainly grateful to FRN for the opportunity and hope that you find this valuable. And I do want it to be interactive. So if you want to raise your hand at any point or you have questions, we don't have to necessarily wait till the end. I'm happy to just take them on the fly and kind of just see where this goes, and hopefully make it as useful for you as possible. Um, so first we'll jump in with these kind of cloud systems, and we'll digital in general. You've got the two kind of ways of looking at it. One is your computer, which is digital, and increasingly tablets and phones and other things like that. Those are devices, personal devices, where you would store data. And then there's the cloud stuff, right? Google, Dropbox, OneDrive. So that's kind of the two ways that you can store data digitally. And in fact, you can use them together. So you can store stuff on your computer and then sync it to the cloud. And that's something I would actually recommend. So diving into the cloud storage a little bit more, there's lots of flavors out there. They're all pretty similar. They're just data centers hosted out somewhere else, right? And we connect to them via the internet on a secure connection. And then the interface that they designed, we can use it just like we use folders and create files and folder structures. So, they're native file systems. As I said, you can sync them with your personal device. Something I want to touch on is that the infrastructure underlying these systems tends to be highly secure. So, I mean, for example, Google or Microsoft, they have, 3 or 4 times as many people working on cybersecurity than the entire, employee base of the city of San Leandro. San Leandro has 500 full-time employees, and I think Google probably has 5 times that many that work just on security. So they have tremendous resources, and it's not just that. I mean, you can look in the news or look for reports, and it's very, very rare to hear of the underlying infrastructure being breached. we hear about breaches all the time, and I'll touch on that, but it tends to not be the actual infrastructure. It tends to be through an account or through some other way in. So I would want to reinforce that these systems are secure underlying. The infrastructure is secure. Privacy, of course, is another matter. Google is, their business relies on using our data to monetize it. Although there are privacy, their privacy policy states pretty clearly that they're not reading our documents. So if you put stuff into OneDrive, there's no human being that's actually reading that stuff. So, but that's a little bit more murky than the security. And then they have, free versions. So I'm assuming that we're mostly talking about not the enterprise versions, which differ, but the personal, ones that we would sign up to with just a regular account. And they have paid and free versions. Free versions usually have some kind of cap on how much storage you can put. So happy to answer more questions on those, but this is kind of this is my Google Drive, and we're all familiar with what that looks like. And I've circled the down here at the bottom right, that Git drive for desktop, and that's the tool you would use to sync your desktop to Google Drive, which is important if you want to really do this document management full end to end. You would want to scan it into your computer and have that sync up to Google Drive. So that would be kind of the architecture, if you will, that we would use. So if the underlying infrastructure is secure, which I said, and it is, then what are all these hacks we always read about? What are all the breaches? Well, the weakest link is us. Okay, and excuse me for the Uncle Sam imagery. I'm not trying to make any kind of political point or anything by any means. I just like to, it's us. We are the weakest link, and our security depends on how we protect it. All right, no one else is going to protect our data. We have to protect it. So with that, I'm going to just dive into some cybersecurity 101 to kind of give some framing around using these tools. So our accounts are tied to our devices, right? Think about your phone. Think about how many different accounts you have, how many apps you have. Each one of those apps has an account. Some of those accounts are more secure than others, right? Some of them have multi-factor authentication enabled. Some don't. Sometimes the device itself is not secure, so you don't have a password or a PIN on your device. Well, if somebody gets that device and it doesn't have a PIN and they swipe and unlock it, and all of your apps are on that and have the password stored on them, guess what? That person now has access to all your stuff, all your social media, all your Google, anything else. They could go in, change your password, make it something that they want, and lock you out of it and do whatever they want to do. So your devices and your accounts are actually the weakest link. And so those are the things that you need to protect the most, because these things are always connected. And if someone gets access to one of those accounts, that's how the bad stuff happens. So speaking of bad stuff, I work for a municipal government. So here's a little bit about just how real this is in the world. These ransomware attacks in the last few years have created billions of dollars of losses for governments. They've targeted hospitals and emergency operations, knowing that those are going to be pain points where there's going to be a higher likelihood to pay the ransom because of how mission critical the operation is. So we're not talking about somebody like in a garage. These are sophisticated criminal actors, and so that's another thing I want to do is kind of want to just disabuse anyone of that kind of outmoded stereotype of the the hoodie hacker who's just sitting there and some teenager. It's always some young white man teenager. That's the stereotype, man, and it's a movie falsehood. The reality is that these are criminal enterprises, and they're typically state funded, and they're wide enterprises that have hundreds and thousands of people working for them, coordinating these attacks. So that's really what the cybersecurity kind of landscape is. And I don't even like the term hackers. I like to use the term hackers in a positive way. Like people like to hack things. That's being creative. People that do criminal attacks, that's different. That's a criminal action. Someone is stealing your data. Let's call that what it is. That's a crime. Um, so how do they happen? That's what's important. So there's kind of some different ways, and you've got a network attack, right? This is that infrastructure level where they would actually hack into the infrastructure, and that does happen, although it's very rare, at least in the media. It hasn't been reported that often that happens to like Google Drive, for instance. And then there's email and there's web. And this is 80% of the stuff is going to happen right here. It's going to happen in email and web. It's you. They're attacking you. They're going after you. And they do it in unsophisticated ways and they do it in highly sophisticated ways. And that's phishing and spear phishing. So phishing is pretty unsophisticated. You think of just like throwing a giant net out into the ocean and just dragging it and you get what you get. That's just like a mass email blast where they send it out and hope that someone clicks on it. Spear phishing is where they actually target you. They do some research. They look you up online. They look your organization up online. They find out what they can. And then they go after you with a much more sophisticated attack, hoping that you're going to click it. These are the ones that get really dangerous. And then these can work together with a web attack where you actually click a link and then that takes you to a website that has malware and the website downloads that, installs it on your computer, and next thing you know, your computer is being run as part of a botnet and you don't even realize it. And they're stealing your passwords as you're typing them into websites because they have a password stealer. So that's what you need to look out for. It's this giving up your password, giving up the keys, right? The keys to your house. Would you just hand anybody the keys to your house? No, you got to think of your accounts as the same way.
So Tony,
Yes.
just briefly, so can you, since you mentioned passwords, can you explain multi-factor authentication and the advantages of that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. So multi-factor authentication is just a method to provide another layer of authentication. So you log in with a password, that's one thing. And you increasingly now it's you log into your bank and the bank says we need to send you a text message. And so then you get a text message on your phone, it says it's from Wells Fargo, please put in this code. The code's usually valid for a certain period of time, maybe like 2 minutes. You put that code in and then it authenticates you that way. So that's a pretty common multi-factor. So it's multi because there's two different ways that they're authenticating you, through your password and through the code that they've sent you to your phone. Although that's increasingly being breached too. So I can tell you, we had an example. So usually you can get them sent to your phone, or you can ask for them to call you. And so then you'll get an automated, call that says, "Oh, this is Wells Fargo. Please put in code 123." And so if you don't have access to a text message, say, or you're only on a landline, or you just don't want to use a text message, that's another option. But what can happen is we actually had this happen where somebody got a call from somebody posing as a bank saying, "Oh, hi, this is it wasn't, sorry, it wasn't a bank, it was Microsoft." They called in and said, "Hi, this is Microsoft and we're trying to authenticate your account. Can you please tell us what the code is that you get sent to you?" And so then what was happening was there was an attacker who had this person's password and was logging in to Microsoft with that person's password, but was then getting that second level text thing. And obviously they don't have their phone, so they can't get the text, but they knew this person's phone number and they called them and said, "This is Microsoft. Please tell me what the code is you're getting on your text." And this person did. And boom, they bypassed multi-factor authentication. So even that is not foolproof, is my point. So it's absolutely recommended. Do not have critical information connected to an account that does not have layers of security on it. Um, but at the same time, don't think that that's foolproof. Like, you have to be vigilant all the time. If you get a call and someone's asking you for a code, for a password, for information, you really have to ask, who are you? why are you asking me for this? Or is this legit? So that was just a little case study where you know, they're always one step ahead. So it's really a tough landscape. So phishing emails. Any other questions? I'm happy to dive in, and I know I'm diving into this a little deep, but I do want you to take home this idea that the systems tend to be secure. It's us that are not. So what you can do to fight that is to secure yourself and be aware. Awareness is really the key. So phishing emails, there's some good practices. You can just look for an email again, or it could be a call too. If someone calls and they're asking for information, well, who is this person? What are they really asking me this for? Can I cross verify that this is real? Like, what if I say, hold on a second, I'm gonna open a support case with Microsoft, and then go on Microsoft and see if they have one of those chat things and say, did you guys just call me? Or would you ever call me? Try to verify that the person asking for information is really legit. You need another way of doing that. So, if you look at their emails and, there's poor grammar, or there's, things that are obviously a little off, they're claiming to be a bank, but, it's a badly written email. That can be a giveaway. So you have to kind of look for that kind of stuff and get good at kind of just identifying this. And so, this is an obvious one, right? We should all by now. Walmart doesn't give away $1,000 gift cards to people. So if you get this, and spam filters are really good about catching this stuff now too. We If you use Google or anything else, um, they have built-in spam filters, and they're pretty good these days. And you can rely on them to catch tons of this stuff, and you never even see it because it's in your spam folder, which is great. And if this does happen to slip by, I'll say, "Oh, you're not going to get me with that old, Prince wants to give you $50,000 to help him with his scheme or whatever." Um, so that one's obvious. Here's one that's a little more sophisticated. This is a PayPal link. PayPal's emailing you saying, "Hey, we need to update your password. Your account is limited." That sounds bad. If I use PayPal a lot, I'm gonna say, "Whoa, that's not good. This thing looks pretty legit." Now what's a little more clever about this is that it's a link, right? And the link, when it shows up in the email, is just text. It doesn't show you what the actual site is taking you to. So they're just hoping you see that, click on that, and then it's going to take you to a website that looks like PayPal. It's going to have the PayPal logo and everything else, but it's not PayPal, right? If you inspect that link, what you'll often see is something more like this, where this target here on the right is the actual site that link is going to take you to. And so the way that you can do this right away, I'm going to go back to this other slide. When you get an email and it's got a link like this, is you can hover over the link, or you can even right click and say copy link and then paste it into the notepad or any Word or anything else. And you can see what the actual link is. And if it's not https://www.paypal.com, it's not legit. Don't touch it, don't click it, don't do anything, because that link is for sure bad. It's going to be one of these links. It's going to look like something weird, and it's going to take you to a bad site. So the good news is that that's not that hard to pick up on once you get used to it, and once you start to look for it. And like spam filters, they have anti malware link filters now, usually built in to Google and other sites, and they're pretty good about catching. They catch tons of these, malicious links that get sent out, which is good. But as we even get more sophisticated, now we start to see where there is no way to filter this, because this is an email where Bob Smith is sending Lisa an email saying, "Hey, and I'm assuming this is some kind of like, business here." And so Bob is saying, "Hey, Lisa, I got to get an urgent payment. Can you please let me know the bank details so I can send this out?" This is pretty typical, right? All different flavors and variations of stuff like this. I need to make a quick payment, or, "Hey, I'm stuck in Delaware. Can you please send me a credit card info so I can book a flight?" What's happened here and why this is harder to pick up is there's no link. There's nothing outwardly suspicious about this other than that they're asking for personal information. But otherwise, Lisa would have no way of identifying, like right away, how can I check this? What's probably happened is Bob has been compromised. Someone got into his account and started sending out emails to all his contacts. And that's a pretty common thing. When an account gets compromised, you'll know because that person will suddenly have sent out 30 of the same emails to everybody that he knows. You're like, Bob, why did you send this to, like, you sent this to everybody we know? Well, that's not Bob. Somebody got Bob's account. So in this case, the best thing for Lisa to do is to call somebody. Call Bob. Hey, Bob, did you just send me an email? Because I got one from you. Oh no, I didn't send anything. I think my account got hacked. There you go. Don't act on this right away. But this, what I want to show, what I'm trying to show is how it gets more and more sophisticated. It gets harder to just know right away. It takes another level of review. So this is the last one. This is one where I put this together for a presentation previously where this was from Konica to Family Resource Navigators team. And she's saying, hey, this is important. I need all the data sent to me real quick. Um, and if you look at this at first glance, it looks legit. That's her name. It's spelled right. A lot of times emails won't actually show you the email address. It'll just show you the name. But in this case, if you look at the actual email address, you'll see that it's not her. So what somebody here has done is they've created a Gmail account, or in this place, a fake place 123 account, but let's just say a Gmail account, and they use Konica's name so that it shows up as the display. And then they sent it to you, hoping that you don't notice that the actual email address is not from Konica. And so this would be an example of a very targeted attack where someone knew who was working in the organization and specifically wanted the data from, or the financial information, whatever, and then targeted that people in that organization. So this is where we start to get dangerous because the worst hacks emanate from stuff like this, where anybody could have given up the information, and now an actor goes in and essentially has the keys to the house. So a quick framework, I'll wrap this up. Own it, secure it. This is put together by the federal government, and so there's a lot of information. So this is where we can get in things like multi-factor authentication, but these are just good practices. So own it means you gotta treat it like you own it. It's yours. Everything we've talked about, don't share your information, know who's sending it to you, secure it, multi-factor authentication, lock things, have a device password, a PIN, make sure your device always has some kind of password on it. Speaking of multi-factor authentication, the most secure ways are not text messaging and not phone calls, but are actually Authenticator apps. So if you go and download something like Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator, these are apps that you can then scan the service you want, like with a QR code. And then when you try to log into that service, the app has a little code that just randomly generates. And those ones are much harder to crack than a text message. Text message is pretty wide open, actually. So if you want to be the most secure, you would use an Authenticator app. I don't want to get overly technical, though. And then protect it. So this is another part of this step, is protecting your information. So now I'm going to dive in and talk about the folder structure strategy. And this is all of my beautiful wife, Stacy. She actually has done this in her work where she's helped them organize their file structure. She's a project coordinator, and so that they can track their projects and they can stay on top of stuff and they can know where all the documentation is, the purchasing, et cetera. So she's got the mind for this.
Okay, so Tony,
Yes.
before you go into file structures and organization, I don't know if you can go back to the slide where there was email, Konica's email, slide
Yes.
18, I believe. So there's a question, and in this case, this one said standard encryption on the bottom and security.
Mm-hmm.
So first, encrypted email, is there a chance that it could be at risk to be hacked. That was a question. And also, can you explain social engineering? What does that mean?
Yeah. Okay. Sure. And again, I'm glad that you're asking questions. People are asking questions now, because otherwise, I'm just kind of going through this thing and not sure if it's connecting. And I want to make sure that this connects. So, encryption, TLS encryption has been around a long time. However, TLS 1.0 and 1.1 are now deprecated. So Microsoft, Google, all the major providers no longer support TLS 1.1 because it's not secure or as secure. And so TLS 2.0 is the most secure. And if your email is sent over TLS 2.0 or any kind of internet communication that you're doing is through a TLS 2.0 encryption, that is highly secure. That cannot be hacked. But what that means is that it can't be hacked in transit. So from the time I send it to the time it's received, it's secure, right? It's encrypted, which means that if anybody were to intercept that message, right, and then you can do that, right? You just use like a traffic sniffer, right? So what that means is when you send this out from your computer, if I have a traffic sniffer running on it, I'll actually be able to intercept all the traffic that goes through, right? And I can crack it open and I can see, well, what's going on in there. If it's encrypted, all I see is gibberish. This is of no value to me. If it's not encrypted, I can see it. It's called plain text. I can see it so if you visit a website in plain text and put your password in there, and I'm sitting on one side of that transmission with a sniffer, well, I can see everything now. So when you're on a TLS connection, you're totally secure, right? That's the industry standard. However, that's only in transmission. So still on the sending and receiving end, when it's unencrypted so you can read it, well, so that's where you need to secure your device. Because if somebody gets access to your device, if somebody can impersonate you, right? They log in and the computer thinks, oh, hey, Tony's logged in, it's not me. They're going to see everything unencrypted. So it doesn't matter how it was sent, because at that point, in order for us to be able to read it, it has to be unencrypted. So that gets to the second point, which about social engineering. So social engineering is this whole idea that I'm going to use, um, ways to kind of get my way in the door and to gain your trust in order to take advantage of you or your organization. So what I just mentioned here about this one with Konica, like that's an example of social engineering. Somebody has thought through, how can I get somebody in FRN to send me all of the data? What would be a good way to do it? They came up with a strategy. Okay, I'm going to impersonate Konica, right? I'm gonna pretend that I'm Konica to try to fool them to think that it's really her. So social engineering is about, and a lot of it is about bias, and people play on that bias. Like we tend to trust people in uniform. So if somebody shows up and they got UPS uniform, hey, I need to drop off a package. Go, oh yeah, go ahead. Well, that dude's not from UPS, but we trust it implicitly. And the most sophisticated actors take advantage of that. So a lot of it is about knowing these biases, right? Knowing that there's certain things we trust and certain things we don't. And we have to question that. We have to say, why do I trust this? Why do I think this email is okay? It's not, you know? Or in the worst case, you sense that it's wrong, but then some trust level, something about it that you trust overrides your sense that it's wrong. So even though you have a flag and you're like, I don't think this is real, but I like Konica so much, she's so awesome, that you override your sense that it's wrong and go along with it. And that's what social engineering is about. It's about getting you to give in even when you know you shouldn't. And a lot of it is relying on biases that we all have, and so it's just being aware of those and, not really just being vigilant, so when anytime somebody, it's just like, imagine if someone comes to your house, says, I just want to come in and do an inspection in your house, will you let me in? Probably not, right? We're all going to say no, that's weird, or I don't trust somebody in my house. You got to be the same way with your digital information. You just really have to think of it like that. Like, I need to always lock it. I need to always make sure that it's protected and secure. And it's not just with your IEP documents or anything. I mean, it's with everything, and if you can be secure at work, you can be secure at home, you can be secure with everything you do. You just start to apply it to everything. When I use Facebook, right? Do I have to be the same way. People can't send me stuff, ask me to do things. I have to question it. So social engineering is kind of at the root of how a lot of these attacks happen. And as I said, they can be very sophisticated, and so it requires even more vigilance to protect against. So I'm going to jump back. So that's the framework, though. Own it, secure it, protect it. That is put together by CISA, which is it's a pretty redundant name. It's like the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency of the federal government, CISA. But they have increasingly, gotten a higher and bigger, platform because cybersecurity is so important. So they're a great resource, and there are tons of resources out there to go learn about stuff and how do I protect myself and what should I do. But what I would love for you to take away from this, I know I really dove in a little bit here, but what I would love for you to take away is the technology tends to be pretty secure. So when people send you a digital signature thing, or you need to fill out a form online, or they want you to send it, upload it to their Dropbox or whatever, the technology itself is secure. What's not secure is how it's used and whether or not it's being sent by the actual person it's supposed to be. So if the school district sends you a link, it's probably okay. You can call them and verify, did you really send this? Is this a school district? But if you're expecting it to come and they send it to you and you're in contact with them on another channel like email, you can probably trust that. I would, I'd say, oh, no, I was expecting this. I know that this is coming. And then the other thing is, when you click on that link, do what I mentioned. Make sure that it's https://www.dropbox.com. If that's what the URL says in your browser, it cannot be anything else. Otherwise, it wouldn't work. Like, they can't fake that. But if it's dropbox.de/give me your data, I know that that's bad, and I'll tell the school district, hey, I think you guys got hacked because you're sending out malicious links. But, school districts tend to have good IT teams. I'll give some kudos to them. So yeah, the key takeaway is that the systems themselves tend to be very secure. Digital signatures are to a standard of the Department of Defense, DoD. So when you get a digital signature request, there's actually a DoD standard, Department of Defense standard, that has to meet before DocuSign or whoever else can actually sell a digital signature solution. They have to show that the encryption and the technology meets the DoD standard, which is, as you imagine, quite high. But if it's sent from a malicious actor who's pretending to be your best friend and has tricked you into thinking that he's really a cool guy, well, that might not end well.
So Tony, this is Eileen. And
Hi,
I
Eileen.
wanted to ask something about this that I've been hearing from parents since you mentioned the school districts. And a lot of parents are being asked to sign documents from the school districts for IEPs and for evaluations and for other things. And I've heard from parents that they're not getting access to the full document when they're being asked to sign. That sometimes they're just being given the signature page and not the overall document. And then when they sign, they realize when they get the whole document that they signed away some rights, or they signed away, it's okay not to have things on the right timelines or things like that. So can you talk a little bit about what people should do in terms of looking at a document before they do a digital signature, when they're, even if it's from a secure actor and they know it's the right thing? But it's still a circumstance where some people are a little unscrupulous sometimes and ask people to sign things that they shouldn't be.
No, thanks, Eileen. And that definitely gets into, I mean, now we're taking a more, I know the word holistic is a little overused these days, but this is really a more full picture view of, it's not just the technology and the systems and do I trust the source and all that, but you also have to read through the contract as well and not sign anything that you don't fully agree with or are not sure of. And a lot of times, so whenever I sign something online, do a digital signature, I expect to get an email response that has, the fully executed agreement in it. And I expect to be able to review that even before I sign it. So I expect to be able to click the link, it takes me in, I could see the whole document, I could read through. They try to be convenient and give you the little button to click and it shoots you right down to the signature page. But if you want to read the whole thing, don't click that button and just scroll through it. You should be able to see the whole document and then get down to the bottom and sign. I would definitely be suspicious. That's a strong word, but I would definitely wonder if I was sent only a signature page, I wouldn't sign it. I would just send it back and say, no, no, these 10, I want, because you're going to get a copy of the signature. And the whole thing here is you want a copy of that documentation for your records. So when it's all done and you sign it, at the end of the process, you'll get an email with the whole PDF attachment and you can save it. So you just send it back and say, no, I want the whole document. I don't want just the signature page. And that's really unfortunate if that's the case. And
Well, we were on a training last night, and there were at least 4 parents who reported that they had been given things that were different than what they thought they signed. And so
yeah.
we were talking about, instead of maybe signing online where you can't cross anything out. So say in an IEP, you don't agree with dropping the OT services for your child, and they've sent you an IEP to sign and it has it in there. But there is literally no way in the DocuSign to express that disagreement, right? So we
Mm,
also talked about printing it out in paper, right? Reviewing the paper. And if everything is kosher, then of course you can, do a digital signature of it. But if it's not, then to take, a marker or to take a pen and to do a physical sign, right? Because that's perfectly, I know it's not quite as convenient, but it is perfectly legal in the world to physically sign something. And so that was a strategy, and I'm not saying that this happens often, but it is, sometimes people agree to things in the IEP process that they don't think they agreed to. And we have been hearing that this is because things were written on IEPs and people didn't carefully review them before a digital sign. So I think one of the kind of new twists in this is make sure all the things that you've been saying, make sure you're being careful, but also as you're talking about your kids' rights, the same sort of things are involved. Don't sign anything away that you don't want to.
yeah, no, that's a great point. And it's just, I think it just goes along with the whole thing about just being vigilant, and it's the whole package from the security and the safety to the contents. So yeah, no, thank you, Eileen. I would hate to lead anybody astray into giving them a false sense of trust, which I just explained people use against us. So yeah, when you get the documents, you have to don't sign them. I mean, that's the problem with technology is it makes things very convenient and it makes it very easy to just click. Oh, I got it on my phone and I can just, move on and with my busy life. But, you know, sometimes that can be a problem. So I'll jump onto the folder structure here. So this was a strategy, and it's pretty, you just have some kind of logic that you file your things by. In this case, you can do by organization or you can do by service or both, whatever works best for you. And so here's a couple of subfolder examples. So, inside Kaiser, you have different types of things that happen. Inside the school district, there are different types of things that happen. Speech therapy, different types of stuff, progress reports, weekly notes, all these different flavors and types of documentation that we get that we have to save. So thinking through before, you set this up is like, how do I want to structure this? And just having a logic to it makes it easier. And then some tips and tricks that my wife mentioned were, keeping the name short so it's easy to remember. Using numbers, as you noticed, like on here is numbered. Otherwise, it's going to default to a alphabetical order, and she would prefer to be able to have it in the order that she wants, so she numbers them. And she does prefer PDF for the final document, but again, she has Adobe Pro that you can edit PDFs. I don't, so I always like, hey, can you edit this PDF for me? Because I don't have it myself, but I prefer Word. I use Word to do all the editing. And Eileen, what you were mentioning about scratching stuff off, you're right. When you get the final PDF sent to you, that's typically not editable. There is a time when there are certain forms that can be in PDF that, writable forms, fillable forms. And then if you have Acrobat Pro, you can open up PDF documents and edit them. However, during a signature process, the PDF is typically in its final form. So, that would be before then you would have to do that kind of redlining or the legal review where you say, no, scratch that. I won't accept that before you sign it. So if it's not in the form that you would accept, then it's not ready for the final PDF. You still want it in some kind of an editable format. So we went through this. One of the things that we've learned is, you can ask providers, can you give this to us in a PDF? They hand you a big stack of papers and you say, can you send this to us in a PDF? So we have it. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. Kaiser's been sometimes okay about turning around a PDF to us. You can scan it, and I've got a little section on scanners coming up, or you can go to Kinko's and just have them scan it and pay per page. I think it's important that you do it right away. So, the problem with this stuff is that, we're all so busy and so much stuff's going on. You get the form, you get the paperwork, you put it down somewhere, I'm going to get to it. You don't get to it, and the next thing, when you need that thing 2.5 years later, you're looking through all your drawers. What did I do with it? And another little tip with digital storage is that in your naming conventions to search for stuff later on, you can use wildcards. So if you remember kind of, it was January, you can just type JAN asterisk, and that'll search for everything with Jan in the word. So, or like in this case, I put SPE, which would catch anything that has speech or anything else related to that. So you can use those wildcards to later on search through your documents if you can't find them right away. And so just remembering what that naming is to help you later on when you need it, because that's what this is all about, is being able to access those documents later when you need them. So scanners, any questions on that?
Yeah. So Tony, I have one question. If you go back to the previous slide, so based on what you're saying is, so from a parent perspective, if I am sending sort of a quote official document to my child's special education team, so if I shouldn't send a Word document with my signature on it because that means it's editable, I should send it as a PDF. Is that the understanding?
That is the most secure way for sure. Okay. So if you send them a Word document and it's got terms in there that you're agreeing to, typically, I know from working with legal contracts, there's a whole process of, back and forth, and we redline stuff, we scratch stuff. I don't want this, reject that, accept this. And so you go through this kind of, review process until you have the final form. And then both sides will have a chance to review that still in Word, in an editable format, excuse me, and then create the final one. And typically somebody is charged, one of the two sides will be charged with creating the final version, saving it, and then sending it. And we won't do the execution until everyone is, both sides have reviewed that. So yes, in a circumstance where you're working on something with a provider and you're coming to an agreement and it's in Word, I would say this is the, you know, final version. You know, do you agree with everything in this? And then save the final copy so that you look at it multiple times before you sign it. And you can ask them to sign it first and send it to you before you sign it. So don't sign first, you know, sign it to have them sign it first. And then you have a chance to review that. So yeah, editable versus non-editable. Typically you want the PDF to be the final saved, you know, archive version, and the Word is kind of the working version. So.
And also, Tony, just for this, if you have a digital signature, don't ever put it in an unlocked document. You know, in terms of people being able to steal your identity, having a digital copy of your signature is a great place to start.
Yeah, yeah, and so that gets to the encrypted email too. So when you send something like that, I would not advise to send anything that is sensitive just through a regular email. Like you would want to send that through an encrypted email, or you would want to put it into Google Drive or something where they could retrieve it, and you can specify, you know, who has access to get it. And they only give them read access, so all they can do is just download that file. They can't edit it. So that's where, you know, sending where we're you know we're looking at the transmission of the document, and is it secure? Can we validate that it's secure from the time that it's created to the time that it's saved to the time that it's sent and received and opened, and the whole transmission. So when, you know, looking at security, you would look at that entire chain and be able to validate every step. And if you're using just sending it on Google, on Gmail, that you can't say for sure that that was secure, that it wasn't tampered with. So unfortunately, I don't think Google offers encrypted email just on its free personal email. But I can look into that and give you a better answer. So scanners, go into scanners a bit. So there's tend to be just two kinds of scanners, you know, flatbed scanners and sheet fed scanners. And for the work that we will have, you know, the stuff that we're going to have with our children, you want a sheet fed scanner. You know, you don't want a flatbed single document scanner. There's no way you're going to sit there and scan an IEP one document at a time, and each scan takes 2 minutes. You know, it would be a barrier to doing it. So pages per minute is a typical kind of a metric you want to look at. You know, I think 25, 16, 25, even 50 pages a minute is going to be the area you want to get for a good scanner. And then they have, you know, software that you install. And if you've got the software from your cloud host also installed, then you'll create that full chain where, you know, you scan it into your desktop, it goes into a folder, and that folder automatically syncs to Google. So you create like a really automated process to do it. And the price range, I think the sweet spot for these kind of scanners is probably $200, although that might be a little low, but they can be pricey, you know. And I just grabbed a couple of them that I would recommend for this kind of stuff. So here's an Epson's, $250. This I think is 25 pages a minute. This is a little portable one. So if you wanted like a little, you know, my wife actually has one of these at work and likes it a lot. I think this is 15 pages a minute. It's a little cheaper. And then here's a really cheap one, but this is one of those flatbed scanners. So I actually have one of these sitting right here on the desk. I would not try to use this for any kind of document scanning. It just would not work. But it's really good for scanning, you know, one-off stuff. But I wouldn't recommend it for this. And then finally, there's some newer stuff. They have like these little mouse scanners. So they're, you know, you can just click a button and scan across a document. It's kind of cool, but I don't know. I don't know if it would suit this purpose, but I threw it in there because, you know, you never know. They're always trying to innovate a little bit on this stuff. So that pretty much concludes what I have. And again, I hope that this kind of hit the mark, but I think in the questions, maybe we can get more specific. So let me look through. I'm going to look through the chat real quick and just address some of these. So the first one was from Isabel. Does an encrypted email increase the risk of a hack too.
Yeah.
So no, and again, think of the encrypted part is the transmission. So when you send an email that's encrypted, it just means that throughout its transmission, bouncing from all the servers around on the internet, um, nobody can crack it open and look at the contents of it. So that actually secures it during the transmission. It's the most secure way.
Okay, Tony, I have one here. You'll probably see it, but what about phone scanning apps? How, you know, are they efficient for, just, obviously not to scan a whole IEP, but, what is your sort of experience or recommendations on phone apps that scan to PDF?
Yeah, so I'm not totally familiar with these. Like I haven't really done any kind of research on them. I would think again that the technology itself is going to be pretty secure. And Google now, like I use Google Photos a lot, right? So I take lots of pictures on my phone and I have it all synced up in Google Photos, and they're doing all kinds of stuff with those, like creating videos that make me tearful about my kids when they were little. They do all kinds of stuff like that. And it's all automated. But what I noticed they also do is if I take a picture of a document, so hey, I got to remember this thing, they can read the text on it and they'll say, do you want to save a copy of the text? And then it puts it into like a Google Doc that's editable. And I don't do that too often. I don't find the need for it yet, but it can. I mean, I think the technology is mature enough. OCR they call that. Optical something reading. And OCR technology has been around for a long, long time. But basically, that's when it scans a document and then it reads the actual text and can create a text copy of it. So those I think would be secure. And again, it's how you store it. If you're using the app, and does the app have some kind of storage connected to it? Like is it tied into some larger system? And again, the weakest part of that is going to be your password and your account. And if somebody asks you, hey, can you give me your mobile doc scanner password? That's how they're going to get into it. So the technology itself is probably, again, I can't say that for sure because I'm not entirely familiar with it, but the scanning technology has come quite a ways, and the technology tends to be secure. So I would say, sure, if it works for you, give it a shot. And then again, with if a lot of these apps use a freemium model, so they have like a free one. It might have some limitations on it, and then they have a paid one for stuff like this, where we're treating very sensitive information and information that we're going to need for years to come. I would always recommend paying. Like the free versions are not going to be. They're going to have limitations that could cause issues down the line. And a lot of times those limitations could also be in the form, make them less secure. So for instance, like if you have a free version and, that free version was to be breached somehow, like an attacker would have access to all the free accounts. Whereas on the paid accounts, they tend to segment them and have them in different infrastructure. So I would always recommend with these types of apps to not use the freemium. The other thing is they might sell your data on a freemium plan. It might be, hey, use it free all you want. But typically that model is, the way we pay for this is to sell your data. And it doesn't mean they're going to sell your IEP data, but they might sell whatever metadata they get on you, like how often you use the app, and the type of stuff you're doing with it, and how many times you've emailed stuff out of it or whatever. So I would recommend springing for the paid version on this stuff.
So, are there any more questions? It's about 2 o'clock, so if there isn't any questions, or you'll feel free to email me. I will type my email in the chat. But Tony, thank you very much. Just waiting a few minutes to see any questions come in, but thank you. Always great to hear from you and learn really just how to keep everything secure, especially now that we are living in a really technological world and everything is fast. You know, it's all about speed these days, and so it's nice to know really just things to look out for as a parent. You know, we're all busy parents here. And yeah, your expertise is very much appreciated today.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. I hope that was helpful. And if you have questions about Dr. George, I'll email them and I'll send them to my wife because she's far more organized than I am.
Okay, and for everyone who's listening, a copy of Tony's presentation will be emailed to everyone, and at least for those who registered on Eventbrite. And if you would like to request a copy and you didn't register through formally, please email me and I can send the presentation to you. I will type it in again. But thank you everyone for attending. Happy Friday. Thank you again, Tony, for your
And let me
time.
just say thanks to everyone at FRN, anyone who's from FRN and the work you do. It's extremely an honor to be associated and to serve, and just to see every day the dedication you have for so many people and the value that you bring to the community. Just as I said, I'm really humbled and honored to be associated with you. And Eileen, all the good work you do, you're a saint, and thank you for the opportunity to.
All right, so thank
You're
you
making
again.
me laugh, Tony. Thank you so much for being here.